Hey everybody, welcome back. If you've been building your own cardboard beer box hats off the old tutorial that I had, you'll notice that we use this side of the box for the crown, and that will leave your logo upside down. Today I'm going to show you the process that I do on my hats to make the unique Headstrong Hats brand. Be sure to subscribe and ring that bell so you'll be notified when I put out my tutorial on the dimensions that I use to build this hat. Okay, so the first step in making a hat is finding a part of the box that will transfer onto the hat, where the logo or the graphic is legible and recognizable. I use this clear template that I can move around and determine which part of the box will look the best on the front, the back, and the sides. Now, I would typically use a 24-pack or an 18-pack can box, but this 8-pack of 16-ounce pint cans was a perfect fit. Cutting off the excess material that I don't need, I'll be able to take this portion of the box, put it under my clear template, and get a clear visual of how it's going to look before I cut anything up. I initially thought that I was going to be able to use the spine of the 24-pack can box, but as you can see, it's missing the C on the Coors logo, and I didn't think that that was going to look good. The side of the 24-pack can box has a perfect logo that fits perfectly. It will run across the top and the sides without interruption. And now a quick test fit with the front and back logos gives me a clear representation of everything before I start cutting down the boxes and peeling the labels. Now the next thing I'm going to do is just open the box up and start cutting everything off that I don't need to make it more workable with a smaller surface area. Using your razor blade, you can usually get the edge of this paper lifted up just enough where you can start to peel it back. This is a very delicate process and requires patience and time. I've noticed that some cardstock is directional, meaning that if the peeling starts to become too thick, I can actually start from the other side and it will peel off cleanly. But rushing this process can lead to ripping the label and peeling it where it tears and ending up wasting a label, which can be heartbreaking if you have a limited supply. Now once that's complete, I always measure twice and cut once. Even though I've done this countless times, it's always good to remind myself of the measurements I'll need to make this part fit and double check it with my template. And now, all I have to do is cut it down to size and make sure all my lines are nice and straight so that it lines up perfectly and fits in the middle of the crown. I always go back to my clear template, lay everything out underneath it, and that way I make sure that everything that I've cut lines up perfectly and I don't have to make any adjustments. Now it's time to lay it out on the cardstock that I have pre-cut and drawn guidelines on so that I can partition the front and the back logos. This is so when the tabs are overlapped and glued, the labels match up as if they were still a solid label. Lightly drag the blade over the label so the cardstock is not cut. Once I complete one side, I'll repeat the same process for the other side. Always be sure to mark and label your corresponding pieces together so that when you assemble these pieces onto the cardstock, they won't be mismatched from the other side. Applying 3M Super 77 ensures a secure adhesion of the label to the cardstock. Carefully lining up the label, I put it in place and use a seam roller to smooth it out and press out the wrinkles. Once the label is pressed onto the cardstock, flip it over and cut off the excess. Now, since this label is not a solid sheet, I always run a strip of clear tape over the seams to prevent separation, especially in this area because this part of the crown has creases and bends in it during the assembly process. Make sure to cut the tape to the pre-cut points on the cardstock, and then just fold back the excess tape. Okay, so here I'm going to use my straight edge and lightly score the middle line of the inside of the hat. That way when you flip it over and bend it down, it'll create a clean, nice bend in the top of the crown. Use a straight edge to bend these flaps up, and that will recreate the same seams that are on the 24 pack or 18 pack can box that you would typically use. Now it's time to start putting everything together. I always take one quick second to make sure everything lines up before I hot glue it, because once that's done, it makes one heck of a mess to take it apart and readjust it once it's set. All right, so now that that side is done, just simply flip it over and repeat the same process to the other side. I measure in 1/4 of an inch here, and that gives me a visual representation of where to put the side tab while I'm gluing it. So now that I've got everything spot welded or spot glued together, you can take the top of the crown and press it down, and that will give it the overall shape. I take my template and fit it over the hat just to verify and make sure that I have good fitment before I secure it with the rest of the hot glue. And then once I'm satisfied with the results of that, I tack everything down and make it a permanent hold. Using a pair of heavy-duty scissors, I cut off the overlap following the circumference of the crown. Now all I have to do is make little slits all the way around the crown, and that will create tabs that I will use to hot glue the top portion of the brim to the crown. Making the brim, I have a template that I trace out onto a 24-pack can box, and I try to orient it where I can see most of the logo, and you can be able to read it on the front of the hat. So now I'm just going to go through and take off a lot of this excess material, and then I'll go back and do a final cut. Then I'll take the brim, put it over the crown, and check for fitment. Then I use the top brim to trace out the exact template for the bottom part of the brim. So I'll do a rough cutout of the bottom portion of the brim. That way, in case there's any overlap, I have a little bit of room to play with. Now on the inside portion, I'm going to draw an inner circle about 1/2 inch inside of the circle that I've already made. I will cut that out, and then I will create little slits on the inside to make tabs that I will sew an elastic strap onto, and that makes for a more adjustable fit. I don't have a fancy sewing machine, just something I got from Walmart. I think it's called a Project Runway or something like that, but it gets the job done. Now for the assembly portion, I take the crown and the top portion of the brim, use the hot glue gun, and attach all those tabs around. Now that I have the crown attached to the top part of the brim, I take the bottom portion and do a quick little fitment check, and then add a little bit of hot glue just to keep everything together before I trim off the excess edges. I like to add this black piping around the edge of the hat before I sew it because it cleans up the edges from where the scissors went around the outside of the hat. So to finish up putting this together, we go over to the sewing machine and give it a little lap around with some upholstery thread. Here I'm using my drill to pre-drill some holes for eyelets that I will install. They allow for a little bit of airflow coming through the top of the hat and also for structural integrity. And then once everything's done, you give it a little bit of love, shape it and mold it like you want it, and you're good to go. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more of my custom Headstrong hat builds.